Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Um, I've got the camera on so you can see the board because I want to use it a little bit today. I've started the recording, so this will be more lecture today, being that we don't have a whole lot of of people here to have a general discussion. And so what I'm going to do is just go through the issues as I've found them so far, and then go through some of the other related issues and concepts, and we'll make that part of the video that will be posted later this week, probably either tomorrow or Friday. And so you can refer to that whenever you work the post-case quizzes. So this video or this lecture is really for those who, for whatever reason, couldn't make it today, or for the other online students who aren't going to be part of the live sessions. So there won't be a live activity in terms of an open discussion, so it'll just be a straight up just standard lecture today on project management and how project management applies to the situation at IVK. All right, so let's first look at the issues. See if I can make this larger. Most decided that Calder, see if I can raise this a little bit. Calder and Huerta have two very opposing views on project management. They cannot agree on the way project management should be executed in IT. And there are definitely differing ways. Project management is a huge discipline all to itself. There's an IT component to it. But for the most part, project management is project management. And it doesn't matter if it's IT or car construction, building rockets, it doesn't matter. Project management is all about a process, a series of processes and tasks and assignments to those tasks, or assigning resources to those tasks. And some projects can be very rigid, and other projects can be very moldable, or agile is the buzzword that's come about in the past 6 or so years, or maybe even longer. I've seen it show up more in the literature in the past 6-7 years. But agile is the way companies are moving and have moved, because they have decided that they're tired of a 80%, 70 to 80% non-success rate, or if you want to flip it, a 20 to 30% success rate projects in any kind of entity or enterprise. So, and there are real issues related to that, and a lot of it comes down to just experience, communication, and we're going to uncover some of those issues, because projects are a big part of IT. Projects have a start, a general start, and a definite finish. And I do mean general start and a definite finish. And the problem is that definite finish is what gets them into trouble that close. And so the first part of that process is real muddy, and it's general, and then it should just work its way to being firmer and firmer until it's rigid towards the end. And it's just where in the middle do you start to firm up, I think is the contention between Calder and Huerta, because they both want to see successful projects, but one just has a different idea of how to use flexibility and agile or agility in the process. So that's one of the issues. Another issue, Martin doesn't understand project management. I find that hard to believe, but then again, I'm not sure how many projects are in loan operations. I'm assuming they do have projects. They have programs that they set up so that they have different types of loans, and so they have to have some type of team that puts those loan systems together, or that put those processes together. And project teams would be beneficial. But then again, he may not have worked that way. He may not have worked with project teams. He may have been one of those not a taskmaster, but one of those micromanager type people who wants to control everything, and he just tells everybody what to do. He's like the oracle, and he's just kind of just spitting out tasks and just has people do them. So he may not know a whole lot about project management, and it seems that he doesn't. And it may be that way for just the case for the book, although this book is written about a real company, about a real CIO. Harvard does these case studies, and they're generally based on, they just change the name of the protagonists and antagonists and all that. But for the most part, the information in the story or in the case is true, and these people did indeed experience these issues the way they are described in the story. So I'm assuming that the CIO that was chosen, Barton, may not have as much project management background as someone should, specifically for a corporation this size. A $200 million corporation should have a project management office. I think they're mid-level enterprise, so it's surprising that he doesn't, but I don't even know if Davies was, and that may be part of his issue as well, being fired. Many projects were behind schedule and over budget, and behind schedule and over budget. Those are huge no-nos for a CFO, Chief Financial Officer. So you want to keep projects on budget and on schedule. There's a reason why they've set the schedule in a company. They base profit timelines on the ability of projects being successful. And we don't know a whole lot about, I think they discussed one project in particular, but I'm sure there are quite a few others. I think there was a list of, there's a list of projects as an example, in the chapter that shows the confidence levels and how much time it would take to finish those projects. So, and you can see that Davies tried to code them a certain way, but we'll look into that a little more deeply under the justifications arena or justifications section. IBK is paying a hefty retainer to a company for their services that they aren't really sure what is being done or what has been done. So yes, they're paying a company to manage a project and or at the very least execute a project. And the project manager is it could have been Davies. The project manager may be in-house, and they're directing the NetEffects company what to do. But either way, that NetEffects company is a huge bleed on resources in IT and for the company. And my guess is one of the big reasons Davies did not make it. So with respect to the recommendations, some sought to have Jim be better served by trying Calder's approach over Huerta. And we're talking about Calder's approach, which is the Agile Project Management and the over Huerta's approach, which is the more traditional. And when they talk about projects in this context, they're talking about a software related project. So they're referring really to the waterfall method and its rigidity. And if you've had any courses before this, 303, for example, we talk about the different methodologies, and in programming courses, we talk about the different methodologies for writing software. And so a more traditional approach is the waterfall method, where you come up with your requirements and then you turn those requirements into some type of scope or some type of set of features, and then you start delegating out and delivering those features and so on. I'm not going to get into that software model because that's not part of what we're discussing today, but we want to take a look at and compare what is going on in terms of project management. And in project management, there is, if I can find the, see if I can see the screen. Hopefully you can see the board here. In project management, you have this little triangle, and these are the major concerns of any project. And we have the capital C here, I'll put in parentheses, costs. That's what it takes to, in terms of manpower, labor, resources, programming languages or programming training, any type of costs associated, any type of services related to the project. So you have the cost aspect, and those costs are driven by the scope, which is really the feature set. And I'm not going to go over all this again because you should have already taken, hopefully, the 441 course in the program. So we're not going to get too deep into that, just kind of a little bit of a review here. So your features or your feature set is your scope, all the things that you need to do or the software needs to do and who needs to do them. And then you have the T, or the time factor. So you have three things: cost, time, and scope. And these all have to be in equilibrium for a successful project to occur. If any of these goes out of whack, the project will be a failure. So if your costs go up, in this example, they said that actually previously in the previous slide, we saw that the projects were behind schedule and over budget. So we have time is an issue. It's outside the bounds, and we've got costs that are outside the bounds. So what is going to happen to this project? Well, it's probably going to fail because already the costs are out of control and already the time is out of control. And usually what happens is this one is kind of the culprit. We have individuals on the project team or the customer. We have this idea of what's called scope creep. Scope creep is the #1 killer of projects. A customer decides to change their needs, or someone on the project team decides to change the priorities, or something just goes completely wrong with the plan. And generally the plan's within dealing with the scope. And if you change the scope at all, it's going to impact costs and it's going to impact time. It could impact costs or time or both. It just really depends on the situation. But one thing is for sure, that if you're not going to hit your deadline and you're not going to hit your budget, your project is going to fail. And hopefully APM, this is your more traditional way of looking at projects. And actually it is the way to look at projects. You still want to look at projects with this model. and you have your two different software. You have your Agile Project Management, and then you have your traditional, which is based on some type of right. So you have your Agile and your traditional, which is most likely the waterfall method. In this case, I think they also call the waterfall model the SDLC, software development lifecycle. And the SDLC, the reason why we look at the SDLC in this case is they're talking about software development in terms of this net effects thing, and also this infrastructure. And I believe the two are probably embedded with one another. But Agile Project Management has a different set of features that we'll look at in just a minute. I just wanted to kind of give you this overview as we continue the discussion in terms of the recommendations and justifications. Just kind of keep those in mind and maybe try to apply these things as you're hearing the discussion. So Jim will be better served by trying Calder's APM versus Huerta's traditional waterfall SDC, although APM is really a project management related. So we'll talk about those in a minute. But they're trying to apply that to that waterfall method or SDLC. And they're fighting over whether or not to be rigid or be flexible. He could benefit from the adaptability of implementing the Agile method into IT's project management. Yep, and I think a lot of students pick that one in terms of a recommendation. Calder and Huerta Barton just needs to choose which one he thinks would be best for the company. I don't think he needs to choose between them both. I think he just needs to get them both to agree on or compromise. Make sure Barton and company are not leading their projects on a death march. And the death march is this. As you're stepping further and further away from your deadline, and as you're stepping further away from your budget or over budget, you're on a death march. That's what was meant by a death march by the kid in the restaurant. Meet at least once a week with their goals for the week. Then I think make Huerta and Calder ahead of the group. I think you should make Huerta and Calder ahead of the group, or maybe that's they're saying that they want them to lead the group. And then I don't know about that. The weekly sounds a whole lot like Agile, right? If you're doing this iterative schedule. It may get back into more communication, but we don't know what the meetings are about. He needs to go back and read the book Project Management to learn about planning methods. Okay, yeah, reading a book. We're back to going to the library or going to the bookstore and buying a bunch of books on project management. No, that's not going to solve anything. You have to bring in experts. Project management is a skill, and it is a specialty all to itself. And there are IT project managers that are devoted to just IT related projects. And so, because there are special circumstances related to IT versus other projects, such as automobiles or, again, spaceships or what have you. Have objectives and expectations clearly relayed to customers in their agreements to avoid scope creep, right? So, scope creep, we talked about that, right? So we need to set and define, because the customer, they're constantly going to get more value out of their contract. Even if you may not even have a contract with them, or they may not have a contract with you. They're just trying to use you to spec out this software. And so if there are no clear objectives, there are no clear requirements, there's no clear feature set, there's no clear scope, starting and ending place of a work product, or what the product should look like in the end, then scope creep's going to happen. I guarantee it. And this is what will drive, again, the cost and the time element. All right, let's look at the justifications. Oops, I forgot to advance on here. I was looking at the justifications. Without clear objectives and contracts, customers will demand what was originally out of scope work, leading to projects not meeting budgets or timelines, right? So we talked about the scope creep, and that is that justification. There clearly are no objectives or contracts related to this net effects company, and I don't know why they didn't. I think whenever you engage with a company that large, you always work with a contract, but I'm not sure exactly where they were in. Maybe they were in more of a feasibility studies scenario than they were in actually doing anything with the net effects. We just don't really know because contracts, from what I understand or from what I've read, were not listed. High confidence projects do not require extensive prototyping, benefit most from extensive planning. So high confidence projects, and the difference between high confidence and low confidence, and they talk about this in the book, is high confidence projects are things that are being built that someone has built before, and they know everything about building this thing that they want. Say it's a module to the payroll system, and this person's an expert in that type of module. Maybe it's an international scheduling system or supply chain system, who knows. But this person's built it before, they want to do it for this company. And so that's that's an example of a high confidence. They know about how long it will take with a certain number of people and certain number of or certain types of tools and resources, and the availability of those tools and resources. And when I say resources, I also talk about talent and people. So those are high confidence projects. Those you can generally have a nice, clean deadline and can ballpark a cost within 10 to 20% initially. And then once you can work out the actual goals of the project and the requirements, and those very quickly become rigid and don't have to change. They won't change because it's just been done before. Then you have low confidence projects that are less predictable because you're developing something brand new. Think about Elon Musk's Hyperloop, or these rockets that fly up, that launch themselves and land themselves, reusable rockets. You think about that, hasn't ever been done before. So they had to have a project management team that they still had a budget. They still had a time where these things needed to work, or the company would just not be successful. And so they have this idea of cost and time, and all these things are variables. So what you have to do is hit those on regular intervals, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I just wanted to help you understand what high confidence projects are versus low confidence projects. Low confidence projects are less predictable. Prototyping can expedite problem discovery. So even if you build a small rocket with small explosives to launch it and give it some just some basic maneuverability, even if it's remote controlled, you can just somehow make the prototype work so they can actually see it in action, those who are designing it, because you're developing something brand new. And that's why in the space missions early on in the 60s, they did the same thing. It was all about this iterative process. They would shoot something up in the air and look at it and then watch it fall. They didn't know how much that would cost. They didn't know how much that would, or when something would just come about. They just set this time and say, let's just try to get it done in 5 years and see what happens. And you can't do that in today's market. When you have investors want return on their money, and you just can't have these open-ended budgets anymore. When you want to do something daring, you want to build something that hasn't ever been built before, you have to have visionaries, you have to have A-list type people, A-list talent doing some of these things and being the leaders in terms of feature capabilities and things of things of that nature. So low confidence projects are and can be the death of any organization. So you really have to have a good mission. You have to have a good understanding of what it is you want that project to do long term and how it's going to pay for itself, because CFOs are not going to go for these low confidence projects. Not very many of them, because they don't like blank checks. Martin, reading contents about Gantt charts and PERT chart analysis graphs. He sees these data tools and planning resources for better maintenance and tracking. So, yeah, Barton, I guess he's never read a Gantt chart before, or a PERT chart, and you learned about those I'm not going to get into those in this this discussion, but you can certainly look one up. Maybe that would have been a good idea for an example for a live activity, but we're not going to do that today since we don't have enough individuals to get a good set of materials to go over. So Gantt charts, he was just like in love with these new tools that he could use to help track project execution. So he would definitely benefit from a project management course, not just a book. Huerta said, we don't plan enough. We don't establish project scope sufficiently in advance. And that is true, but sometimes you can't plan, or sometimes you plan very well. You plan down to the $10, the last $10, and you know exactly what is going to happen with this project. And then along the way, let's just talk about cars and computers over the past 3 years. You'll find that if you want to buy an Xbox Series X on Amazon, you'll find that you can't get one. You can't just buy one unless you go through some type of third-party seller, but you can't just buy one like you would buy a new computer, or not really, like a small gaming computer or something along those lines. And the reason is there was a chip shortage during the COVID run, supply chain. I'm sure you've heard about supply chain issues. And what if you do run into a supply chain issue? You have this perfect project set up, and then all of a sudden you can't get the chips, or you can't get people. You can't get talent in to actually write code. What happens to your timeline? What happens to your cost if you have to find, you found someone, but they're 3 times the price of someone who did it before, right? So you can't plan for those things. You can't plan your way into a successful project. In most cases, if you've done one before, you can get pretty close, but there are times that you have to be agile. You have to be flexible. And the project will go on that death march if one of those major components, one of those critical paths in that Gantt chart goes awry and you don't hit it. And so, or one of the milestones you don't hit, time or cost will go out of whack and you'll be on the death march. Poor communication with each other. That is another huge problem. In my project management courses I teach communication more than anything. I think the biggest weakness in project management is lack of communication. And the team, you don't have to be sitting in front of one another in order to communicate. There are many ways of communicating in this digital age. And so communication, it appears, is a problem because they can't even decide on a paradigm. in the IT departments. You've got Calder and Huerta at each other, and so they can't decide on a model that works. So they need to do that, and they need to communicate with each other. Even though you're talking, sometimes you're still not communicating. You're not getting your point across. Each side is kind of shut down and in their foxholes and not willing to come out. The kid from Vinny's Bistro's bar had experienced has experienced way too many Death March project lessons that Barton should learn from. And sure, I mean, why doesn't Barton just offer a job to this kid? He seems to be the guy who has the answers, you know. So if the kid is eating there or if the kid is working there, the kid shouldn't be working there if he's experienced way too many death marches. So I'm assuming the kid is just there having dinner, enjoying his the proceeds from his venture capital, I guess. I don't know. Justifications. That was justifications. Other notes. Oh, these are all justifications. Oh, there are more justifications after that I've written down here. Let's go to other issues and notes. I think I've belabored this timeline here. Let's take a look at what Agile means, or what the Agile Project Management life cycle framework, if I could talk, what it looks like in terms of a process. You have your envision step. This is your, essentially, in your waterfall, your traditional model. This is your goal. Your goal setting. You're envisioning what this thing could do in terms of outputs. Whatever it is you're building needs to have a distinct end. You need to know exactly what it is you want. And if you don't know exactly what you want, then none of this is going to be successful. Back with the Musk rocket idea, he had a pretty good idea about what he wanted. He wanted a rocket. He wanted a reasonable rocket. He wanted it to take off and land again. That's a very simple goal. And so in the project, you need to have very specific but simple goals that everybody can kind of get their mind around and start thinking about and envisioning. And they can start thinking about propulsion. They can start thinking about the way to maneuver something, that's top heavy like that. So the envision process is very important, because you can't have a good project without a solid, clean ending to know where you ended up. Cost cannot be the end goal. Somebody says, I have $30 million. I want you to build me a rocket that can land itself. You can't do that. I'm sorry. It's just, you have to get your idea first, see what's possible, see what's out there, and then start working your way back. And then the next step in that process is speculate. So you get your goal, what it is you want to do, and then you speculate about how much it would cost. And you would speculate how much time it would take. But that's based on this mission, this overarching goal. And then you iteratively deliver the features. So you speculate on what it would take to make something like that rocket work, and all of the systems and subsystems and people that you would need to make that happen. And then that would still drive the time and cost variables. And it would just go back and forth until you got between all three of these areas. At every stage, you have to look at all three of those areas. And then you start building the feature set as a prototype. You can build it really small. You can make the features small. You can make the programming small. The programming doesn't even have to run by itself. You can have somebody just make a video of the program the way it should work, and that's your first prototype. And there's money involved in that. People do that with building design and when you're building these huge superconducting super collider projects like CERN, those types of projects, you don't know how you're going to build those. So you have to kind of speculate on that, and you have to kind of make a smaller version of that, and just kind of drive that vision forward, even if it's not running by itself, even if it doesn't have the parts. Now you can get yourself into trouble because that's where Theranos got into trouble, right? And I don't know if you know who Theranos is, but Theranos is forgot the person's name, but is the name of the company that created this blood testing machine, and it was a prototype, and they sold the prototype as a working feature, and obviously they got investors, and they couldn't build a device. They got one good result out of it, and some think that good result was actually hacked, and so on. And so depending on where you are on that process of speculation, you just don't know. And it is specifically when in feature delivery in that prototype, you just don't know whether that's fraud or if that's just basic. I don't know what happened. It worked and then it didn't. That's the case of Theranos, but you have other companies trying these things, and you actually have to have something that works, even if maybe you have somebody kind of pushing some buttons behind the scenes to make it look like it's doing what it's supposed to do. And you make that happen so that you can see what other drivers are needed. And then the key word here is iteratively, deliver features. Iteratively. I'll mark it here, iteratively. And you don't put all the features in at the same time. You only put one feature in at a time, and you see how it works with the system so that you don't have any cross contamination or cross issues corrupting the system and so on. Effects, negative effects. You don't want to have too many features going at once and you don't know what's causing what to fail. So you want to iteratively deliver features. So that has to be part of the plan. You want to start with one feature and see how it works and what its outputs are and how the next feature will capitalize on that previous feature and so on. And that's the whole point. This is a cycle. The APM, the Agile Project Management, is a cycle. And so you go back to this envision phase, you go back to this speculate phase, and you go back to this features phase over and over and over. And then, of course, you'll monitor at each phase, you'll monitor and adapt. So if a feature is not working right, you adapt it and you make it work. And you make it work until that feature is exactly the way you've intended it, with an output that does not change, because if you change what you want the output to be, then you're back into scope creep, right? So you still have to, in the speculation phase, you'll have hundreds, maybe even thousands of these little bitty cycles. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's twice a week, 2 or 3 times a week, looking. Somebody will build something and everybody will come together and look at it and say, no, that's not right. And we'll change it a little bit and then come back and look at it. And it's the iterative process. That's what's important, specifically in the beginning stages of this process. And the big part of the Agile Project Management is the monitor and adapt, the adaptability. The software development lifecycle, these don't have any adaptability features. You have to go back to the drawing board if there's a design flaw. But if there's a design flaw in just a feature, it's easy to fix. You can fix it in just a couple of days, a couple of weeks, depending on the software. So how could Barton, or let's step back, how could Huerta and Calder come together and make these two things work? Huerta's really good at seeing the design phase through to completion and seeing something show a goal or a delivered goal. and really good at planning. So instead of planning the entire project, they need to maybe have Calder, not Calder, but Huerta. They may need to have Huerta be the person to do the feature design, the nuts and bolts, A through Z, the steps. Have them come up with the steps for the feature and see that the feature itself comes out okay. And if it does, great. If it doesn't, then they can analyze, go back to the drawing board if they need to for that feature, and then go forward with a new feature, and then do your unit testing and then your system testing and so on. So that is the idea behind it. And to use your talent, that is what Bart needs to do. He needs to understand that he has good talent there, and they both have really good ideas, but the role of the CIO, the director of IT or whatever, software development manager, CTO, what have you, the goal of that person is to take and use the talents you have, or replace talent if they're not sufficient, and make them work. So Huerta and Calder, I think both are on the right track. They just both need to blend their abilities and compromise a little bit and communicate. And Barton has to facilitate that. He has to put them both in a room and have them fight it out and figure out who's going to do what. Let's take a look. Yep, that's the end of my notes on this chapter. Do you have any questions? No? What about you? You have any? You can write in the Zach. If you have any questions, you can write in the. If you don't have any, that's fine. So I know I ended this. I went through this pretty quick. Although I felt like I was talking a really long time. Normally we have the live activity and we go through it, but we're just not going to do that today. So I can take a couple of questions if you have them. If you don't have them, that's fine. We'll go ahead and end here, and hope that we'll have more participation next week. So I guess that's what we're going to do. I think I'm just going to go ahead and stop now. And if you have questions, you can email me, and or you can ask the question in the group, in the forum. This is a huge project management is so huge. It is a discipline unto itself, as I said. So, but you can certainly ask questions, or if there's anything that you might have objected to in terms of my advice and the way I see it, of course, I want you to bring that up as well. All right, well, I think that's it, and I will see you all next week.